Success in one promotion doesn't guarantee stardom in another. That one sentence perhaps sums the entries on this list up best. And it's one recent AEW to WWE jumpers like Jade Cargill, or brave WWE to AEW leaps made by Adam Copeland should pay close attention to. Of course, early signs are that both will smash it on their new platforms, but they wouldn't be the first to show flashes of promise before totally tanking. So with that in mind, I am Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are some major wrestling stars who jumped ship and flopped. Number 10, Davey Boy Smith, WWF to WCW. The British Bulldog was hot stuff when he landed on WCW television in 1993. Davey was fairly fresh off headlining SummerSlam 92, and that main event opposite Bret Hart was the best match of his entire career. Sure, Bret carried a knackered and drug-addled Bulldog through the entire thing, but people didn't know that at the time. He was a star on the rise. Typically though, WCW could not capitalize. Smith wasn't joining a company mid-NWO boom. WCW was WWF light, and simply didn't have the know-how to make the most of an incoming McMahon-made star. Despite teaming with top babyface Sting, Bulldog was mired in some seriously dreadful mini-movies during a feud versus Vader and Sid. He'd last a year with the chaotic group before working some indie dates back home in the UK, then rejoining the WWF by 1994. That WCW run probably wasn't as fruitful as Smith or Turner Suits had hoped it'd be when the ink had dried. Number 9, the Steiner Brothers, WCW to WWF. Some acts just feel more at home in certain organizations. For proof, check out the Steiner Brothers run in the WWF between 1992 and 1994. Their old school NWO no-frills pro wrestling vibes felt totally at odds with the Federation's cartoonish presentation. Rick and Scott had 2 runs with the WWF tag belts, both wins coming on non-televised house shows weirdly, but they never seemed comfortable under Vince McMahon's umbrella at all. Rugged matches versus teams like the Head Shrinkers didn't fit in with what the Fed fancied producing, and it became clear that the Steiners weren't especially chuffed by how things were going. Both yearned for WCW. In fact, they longed to be anywhere but the WWF. So in mid-1994, Rick and Scott departed for a brief stint in ECW before heading back home where the big boys play. They'd never returned to WWE as an active duo. Scott had a less than stellar 2-year run as a singles between 2002 and 2004, but that was about it. And while on the subject of big beefy tag teams, I want to know who is your favorite tag team ever? Let me know in the comment section right down below. Number 8, Mike Awesome, ECW to WCW. Just feast your eyes on this image here. This was Mike Awesome in his That 70s Guy phase. Yep, that was a thing. It was definitely less offensive than his dire fat chick thriller gimmick. A Vince Russo special, that one, but failed to catch on with fans much the same. People didn't want this version of Awesome. They wanted the awesome ECW Awesome that was, well, awesome. Paul Heyman must have been palming his forehead when he witnessed what the Creative Brain Trust in Atlanta had done to one of his most well-protected acts. In ECW, Mike had been a powerhouse to be proud of. In WCW, he was just one in a long line of wrestlers ruined by an increasingly crap writing process. Gone were big bumping battles versus hardened warriors like Masato Tanaka. Nah, why have that when you can turn Awesome into a lame parody of some cast-off character from that 70s show, eh? That'll put some butts in seats. Or not. Number 7, Taz, ECW to WWF. Bruce Pritchard's podcast comments on Taz reveal that the incoming ECW hardnut was DOA during his first night with the company at the 2000 Royal Rumble. Even though fans in MSG were thrilled by Taz choking out Kurt Angle, WWF officials were not. Backstage, some expressed concerns about Taz's suplexes. Those, despite looking phenomenal on camera and opening the pay-per-view brilliantly, would come to cripple the guy's upward mobility overnight. It certainly didn't help that some also believed he was too small. You know, even though the WWF had scouted, then signed him, it's hardly like Taz was doing anything differently to his blistering run in the original ECW. Vince McMahon seemingly wanted this. Taz slipped down the pecking order quickly and was on color commentary by the following year. Injuries were catching up with him anyway, but man, his WWF/WWE run is a definite what might have been. At least he's been thriving for decades as an announcer. That role in WWE, TNA, and AEW has been kind to the one-time human suplex machine. WWF politicking was not. Number 6, Lex Luger WCW to WWF. Lex Luger's WWF run can be summed up with 3 words/phases: bodybuilding, wannabe Hulk Hogan, and fans wanted Bret Hart instead. That's why the people cheered louder for the Hitman during a 1994 Royal Rumble tie, and it's why Luger's run with the company as a babyface hero ultimately failed. The core audience had been fed Hogan for almost a full decade by the time Lex donned some Stars and Stripes in '93. Seeing a watered-down remix of Hulkamania wasn't appealing to those folks, so they rejected Lex as the #1 baby and firmly rooted for the much fresher style of Hart instead. Most watching from the sidelines probably thought Lex would smash it under Vince. After all, he was one hell of a physical specimen, and had shown promising signs in ring when placed in there with better workers like Ric Flair over on the NWA/WCW side. Then oddly, after flopping in the WWF, Lex returned to WCW and picked right back up where he'd left off. Number 5, DDP, WCW to WWF. Some might regard this one as cheating, because WCW was dead by the time Diamond Dallas Page signed on the dotted line with the WWF. The kicker? Page agreed to a cut price buyout of his AOL/Time Warner deal and backed himself to succeed in the only major company left. That proved to be a bit of a mistake. DDP technically did jump ship before he had to, but wasn't allowed the chance to play up to his wildly successful People's Champ persona post-WCW. That idea belonged to The Rock, and there wasn't room for 2 workers doing the same sort of thing. Instead, the WWF turned Page into a creepy stalker who followed The Undertaker's wife. Lovely. Creative eventually ended that hell for DDP and went mediocre babyface by booking him as a motivational smiler. Nothing on the WWF/WWE side could touch Page's remarkable rise up the ranks in Atlanta. Not even close. Number 4, Sting, TNA to WWE. It was WWE's fault. End of story. Okay, not really end of story, but that one sentence sums things up quite nicely. Sting was introduced as an antidote to the Authority's tyrannical reign of power at Survivor Series 2014, then battled Triple H in a marquee bout at WrestleMania 31, and lost. Yep, this antidote to Tripp's heel faction stared at the light. Look, everyone has their individual opinions on certain wins and losses, but most agree this was a terrible decision. Later in 2015, the Stinger also lost to Seth Rollins at Night of Champions. He was injured during that match and temporarily retired from the ring before turning up in AEW years later. The Icon's WWE run was a mess and a waste of everybody's time. Sting was the one that got away post-WCW closure in 2001, so you'd think WWE would use him properly when they finally got their mitts on the guy. Nope. No elusive Undertaker dream match and exactly 0 pay-per-view wins. Fabulous. Number 3, The Ultimate Warrior, WWF to WCW. It's difficult to judge The Ultimate Warrior's 1996 return fairly as a fan, because he wasn't on WWF TV/pay-per-view long enough to have any meaningful impact on flagging business. By all accounts, Warrior was a nightmare to deal with behind the scenes though. Again, WCW didn't necessarily get that side of him in 1998, but they did get some diminishing returns in terms of overall fan interest in a revived feud versus Hulk Hogan. Although Eric Bischoff might not have wanted to admit it, there just wasn't that much juice in a Halloween Havoc sequel to their remarkably fun WrestleMania 6 original. In WCW, Warrior stumped fans with nonsensical promos that went over their allotted time on Nitro, and he clearly sucked in the ring. There was nothing to be thrilled by, and that made his run for the competition way worse than a WWF reprise had been 2 years earlier. Number 2, Vader, WCW to WWF. Leon White just wasn't the same romping, stomping monster he'd been in Japan or in WCW when he landed on the WWF's doorstep in early 1996. Looking back, folks like Bruce Pritchard and Jim Ross believe Big Van Vader's confidence had taken a knock following a backstage fight with Paul Orndorff before jumping. Being fair, Vader was hampered by injuries too, when Vince McMahon decided to debut him at the '96 Royal Rumble anyway. The big man asked to wait, but bosses wanted some return on their investment ASAP. A thumping angle with then on-screen authority figure Gorilla Monsoon wrote the new heel off TV 24 hours later. It was all a bit downhill from there then. Vader struggled to jive with resident poster boy Shawn Michaels during their world title feud, and he was also finding it hard to keep his weight in check. The WWF acted by sending Leon to a clinic, but it just didn't work. His entire 2-year stint was rife with missed opportunities, wasted potential, and a lack of true faith from higher-ups. Number 1, Bret Hart, WWF to WCW. Bret realized he didn't want to be in WCW rather swiftly. His heart, no pun intended, was ripped out by an infamous Montreal screwjob at the 1997 Survivor Series, and it became clear clear, Bret's appetite for full-time wrestling waned the longer he was in WCW. The Hitman was never a neat fit for the promotion, one totally caught up in Hulk Hogan and NWO fever when he arrived. The NWO story dominated WCW's product, so Hart became a bit part player. He was a mere pawn in the overarching narrative, and that sucked when Bret was one of the biggest gets for Eric Bischoff during this whole war with the WWF. WCW had the WWF star of the 1990s, and they didn't have an effing clue how to book him. Hart has to take some of the blame too, of course. He was visibly apathetic to WCW life, and appeared to phone in some of his appearances. In retrospect, it's actually kinda surprising he lasted up until 2000, because Bret's run with the company was flopping long before that. But he's still the best there is, and you know the damn rest. And that's our list. Know of any other major wrestling stars who jumped ship and flopped? Well, let us know all about them in the comment section right down below, and don't forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you are down there. Also, if you're into this sort of stuff, then please head on over to whatculture.com and find some more fantastic articles just like the one this video you're watching right now is based on. I've been Gareth from What Culture Wrestling. Cheers for watching this flopping vid today. Hopefully I'll see you again very soon, but in the meantime, just be good to yourself. Bye bye.